12 o'clock on the dot, and as promised, we are joined by Greg Swartz of Bleacher Report. Greg, thank you so much for joining us. Happy Monday.
Yeah, thanks for having me on today.
Let's start here, Greg. I was, kind of looking at everything that you've put out for Bleacher Report lately, and just great stuff. By the way, be sure to follow Greg on social media and check out his work on Bleacher Report. You posted at the end, or you wrote at the end of April, bold offseason NBA trades that need to happen. You mentioned Zion, Lillard, and Jonathan Kuminga. Obviously, out here in Sacramento, we're trying to see what that next move is going to be. How bold do you think this summer is going to get with some of these big names?
I think this is probably going to be one of the most exciting summers we've seen, at least in trade activity, in a long time. Because, after that Luka Doncic trade went down in February, I think everybody kind of looked around the league and was like, whoa, if that can happen, anything can happen. And, you look at a free agency class that isn't particularly strong. You look at there's not a lot of teams that have a lot of cap space. It's just going to be mostly a lot of teams with the mid-level exception to spend. Where's the player activity going to come from? I think it's going to come from the trade market, and you're going to see a lot of teams, trying to make that counter move. Okay, Luka's over here now, AD's over here now. Obviously, the Giannis situation, Milwaukee is going to be something everybody's monitoring. So I think, in terms of potential blockbuster trades, I think this summer really stands out as a hotbed for activity.
Talking to Greg Swartz of Bleacher Report. Greg, I know that you have a connection to Cleveland. What do you think happened out there? Obviously, there were injuries, and we were talking about Darius Garland all-star season, but, and very similar, the Kings not having Malik Monk these last couple years been really tough towards the end of the season. And on obviously a higher level, Darius Garland not being available. There was a game where I think 3 of the Cavs rotation players didn't play. Where do the Cavs go from here? I think it's interesting that even though they had the injury situation, people still believe, they don't have enough. They don't have enough.
Yeah, injuries were the number one thing. If you watch, to me, the biggest player affected was Darius Garland.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Darius was just so good during the regular season. He was an all-star, averaged 20 points, shot over 40% from 3, almost 7 assists a game. And he was just kind of that electric second scorer and primary facilitator for Cleveland after Donovan Mitchell. And, he was just completely hobbled, missed the last 2 games of the Miami series, goes into the Indiana series, misses the first 2 games there. Cleveland's offense just does not look the same. It's just completely stuck in the mud. DeAndre Hunter, your big in-season trade acquisition coming over from the Atlanta Hawks, gets hurt in game 1 and really averaged 8 points per game on 30% shooting the rest of the series with a right wrist injury on his shooting wrist. So he just wasn't the same. And then Evan Mobley, I know the raw numbers look pretty good, even though he sprained his ankle in game 1. But it was just like, oh my gosh, like how many injuries are they going to have to deal with?
Right.
And then that completely affected the offense. They stopped moving the ball. Indiana passed the ball over 70 times more per game in that series, leading to open shots. And the Cavs just tried to do too much hero ball with Donovan Mitchell, who was really good, but wasn't good enough to do it himself. So in the end, Indiana's depth overcame Cleveland's injuries, and the Cavs certainly have a long off season ahead of them, and a disappointing one, especially because Boston got knocked out, and that was the team you were worried about in the East.
Talking to Greg Swartz of Bleacher Report. Greg, it is well known on this show that I really love DeAndre Hunter, and you talked about him being a big acquisition for the Cavs. Do you believe that, we have the kind of touchable and untouchable conversation. Do you believe that he'll be somebody that the Cavs will see? It's a pretty decent contract at $20 million that goes up these next couple seasons. Do you think that he'll be on the Cavs next season? And if you do, I'm curious too, as far as the rotations are concerned, he still seems like he could be a starter in this league to me, but he dealt with injuries in Atlanta and then started to come off the bench, and he's coming off the bench with the Cavs. Well, what do you think happens with DeAndre Hunter?
Well, I think whatever happens to DeAndre Hunter is going to be affected by whatever happens to Jared Allen. Because if the Cavs break up their big 4, I think Allen's going to be the one that goes. And I think if he gets traded and you look for maybe a little bit more wing depth, or if you're looking for a backup point guard, if Ty Jerome doesn't resign, if you're looking to shake things up in Cleveland, I don't think you do it by trading a Darius Garland, a Donovan Mitchell, and Evan Mobley. I think it's with a Jared Allen. And there's a lot, and Jared Allen's a really good player. I don't want to trade Jared Allen, but if that's who you trade, then I would foresee Evan Mobley moving to a full-time center role. DeAndre Hunter then presumably would take the starting power forward job. But there's a lot that has to play out. I don't think the Cavs view DeAndre Hunter as an untouchable piece, but that trade to get him was designed with Boston in mind, and they wanted to get under the luxury tax, and they did both by getting him. So I don't think he's untouchable, but he's certainly not a player that the Cavs are going to be shopping to begin the offseason.
Greg, we're talking to Greg Swartz of Bleacher Report. Greg, from the outside looking in, obviously there have been reports that the Kings right now or ever feel like rebuilding fully. What would you do? And I know, taking a look at some of the articles that you've written, you've had a couple other blockbuster trades, but as far as the Kings are concerned, what's the approach that you would take, and what direction do you think that they should go in?
Yeah, well, the Kings have a lot of talent. It's just, who are our core pieces? Who do you identify as a core piece? Because I'm sure a lot of teams are going to call about Domantas Sabonis and say, well, we'd love to have him. And I'm sure Sacramento's going to be like, yeah, well, we love him too. Right. If I'm Sacramento, I'm keeping Sabonis unless I'm just blown away by an offer, because I'm a huge Sabonis fan. I have been for a long time, back to his Indiana days. So I'm definitely keeping him if I can. Keegan Murray's a guy that I think you're going to extend him this summer, presumably. If you can get him on a good number, I would identify him as a core piece. Devin Carter, I really like Malik Monk. And then after that, I assume Zach LaVine's going to stay, because you went out and got him. He's only got 2 years on his contract left now. I played pretty well. I think for me, it's DeMar DeRozan is the piece that, does he fit anymore? Especially if you're trying to get a little bit younger. You're not rebuilding. You're still trying to win. You still have a lot of guys in the prime of their career, like a Sabonis, like a LaVine. But to me, DeRozan is the guy that maybe just doesn't fit anymore. And if you can flip him either for, if you don't view Malik Monk as a starting point guard, if you'd rather have him as a 2, maybe you try to get DeRozan for a starting 1. Maybe you try to get better defensively. I think definitely is something that the Sacramento Kings should try to do. So DeRozan's probably the only guy I would actively shop. And then after that, I would take calls pretty much on anybody else on the roster and just say, okay, we're not shopping Domantas Sabonis, but we'll certainly take offers on him if you want to come with some Godfather offer and blow us away. So I think they should be open to a lot of different things, but certainly improving the defensive side of the ball is the number one thing I'd look to doing this offseason.
As far as Domantas Sabonis is concerned, I think it's interesting because he's a bit unique, right? Somebody, people will call him a diet Jokic at times, and we take calls all the time and texts as far as, well, can he play the 4? Can he not play the 4? You say you're a fan of Domantas Sabonis. What do you think he needs as a front court partner in order to get the most out of him? Because personally, Greg, I don't think he can play the 4. You need somebody that can stretch the floor to play with him.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we saw in Indiana with the Miles Turner. That's, if you're going to put another front court piece in there or a true center with him, you got to have somebody that can shoot. In a vacuum, for example, Jared Allen would do wonders for your defense. He protects the rim, he can guard on the perimeter, but I don't like that fit at all. I don't like the fit between Jared Allen and a Domantas Sabonis, just because Jared Allen can't shoot from 3. He's not going to spread the floor. You're going to have some real spacing issues there. So if you want to play Sabonis at the 4, which I'm not a big fan of, I don't think that's where you're going to maximize your team, especially on offense. You got to bring in a center that can shoot. Now, I'd be intrigued. Sacramento has their full mid-level exception, $14 million, about, would a guy like Brook Lopez sign with you if you could get him on a 1-year deal and just be like, well, this is a guy we can start next to him, or we can bring him off the bench. We can play big, we can play small. And we know Brook can shoot. So maybe somebody like that is who I would look into if you're looking to complement a guy like Sabonis in the front court.
Talking to Greg Swartz of Bleacher Report. Greg, one of the more intriguing situations in the NBA, their season recently ended with the Golden State Warriors. Jonathan Kuminga And a lot of people, yourself included, the sign and trade conversation has happened. And I believe you had a deal where the Warriors would get Anthony Simons and Kuminga would go to Portland. I have no clue what Kuminga's value is. What do you think Kuminga's value is?
Yeah, so the rumors were that he turned down, or he wanted north of $30 million last offseason, $30 million per year. The Warriors obviously were hesitant to offer him that, which I do not blame them. That's a lot of money for a guy who is extremely talented, but hasn't really proven a whole lot. And obviously, there's been a lot of disagreements between him and Steve Kerr out in Golden State. So I think Kuminga needs to go to a team that is not expected to win right away. He's been in the league for 4 years, but he's still quite young. Like, he came to the league very young, and he's super athletic. And I think you need to go to a team where he can play through his mistakes. And Portland was a destination I thought definitely could serve as a fit. The Brooklyn Nets are a team that's going to continually come up for Kuminga because they have the cap space to outright sign him. And I think there's a deal where Cam Johnson going back to Golden State and a deal like that could make sense. One thing you have to keep in mind is, when you do a sign and trade, if you sign Jonathan Kuminga for $30 million, that's not a $30 million swap between teams. Like, the money coming back would be half of that. So it kind of makes potential trades a little wonky. But I like Kuminga. I think he'll be a good player in the right situation, but his future is not in Golden State. I would be absolutely shocked if he went back to the Warriors. And I don't think the Warriors particularly want him back, not at $30 million a season at least.
Yeah, I saw during the Valkyrie home opener, he was chumming it up with Joe Lacob, and everybody said Joe Lacob's not going to trade this guy, as Joe Lacob has been a huge advocate. But yeah, the money's got to make sense. And honestly, the fit, the Steve Kerr thing, that's just been a bit confusing. He's just not. You watch him and you watch the rest of the team and you think, yeah, that just doesn't work. Very, very similar, like you said, to bring it back to the Kings, to watching DeMar DeRozan and just the collection of players that the Kings had this season. A lot of talent, but didn't really work. Before we get you out of here, Greg, you mentioned DeMar DeRozan is the only guy you'd actively shop, and you brought up centers and point guards. Do you have a name off the top of your head for a potential point guard target? We've talked about the big names like the Jaws or the Trae Youngs, and you can go in that direction as well. Or is there maybe somebody in that second tier that you think could maybe help the Kings more than a lot of us realize?
Yeah, like you said, John Morant, Trae Young, those names are going to come up. LaMelo Ball is obviously a guy whose name is going to come up. I mean, if you want to excite the fan base, you can excite the fan base for at least 30 games when he's healthy, when he plays. I don't know if long-term that's the best solution, but I don't know what their asking price would be. It's tough, right? Like John Morant, a couple of years ago looked untouchable. LaMelo Ball a couple of years ago looked untouchable. And now you look at their teams and it's like, well, there's injury issues, there's off-court issues, there's just a lot of different things that go into it now that you have to take into consideration. Maybe a fresh start would help those guys too. If you get Trae Young, that's not going to help your defense. I can tell you that right now. So that would not be my primary target for that. And I think you want guys that are on multi-year deals that you could say, like, we don't want this to be a rental situation. We want you to come in here and be a core piece of this foundation moving forward. Like, we have a lot of talent here. We want to win now. We don't want this to just be like, okay, this guy's on an expiring deal and bring him in. So I think you call about everybody and you say, all right, what's the asking price for this guy? Okay, that's what you want. All right, no, thank you. Because, you got to be open to everything. Like I said, DeMar is the one guy that I don't think fits. But if you can bring in maybe a pass first point guard, somebody who can defend, and really I'd like to see a bigger offensive role open up for Keegan Murray too. I feel like we haven't seen what he's capable of yet. Now 3 full years into his career. Especially if you're going to extend him this offseason, you got to give him room to grow too. So I think it's going to be a very busy offseason in Sacramento, and certainly a team that should be active in trade talks.
Greg, I got a name, and I've been pushing this agenda. I know he's coming off that Achilles, but I think DeJounte Murray is a guy who, shooting the three ball, not his forte, but he defends. He's got good length. He can distribute the basketball. I don't know what the Pelicans are ever doing. So, if that's a DeRozan conversation, I'm not sure. But I think he's kind of a second-tier guy that can give, like you said, that runway to Keegan, see him get more shots, and he's a dog. So that's what I've been pushing out here, Greg.
Look, I pushed for DeJounte Murray trade for the Cavs for a year before they got Donovan Mitchell. Like, that's who I wanted. Like that, I'm a huge DeJounte Murray fan, but like you said, it's the Achilles. Like, when he comes back, he's probably not going to come back till January. Like, so you're not going to have him at the start of the season. So can you be patient with him? And if you trade for him, can you afford to go a couple months when he's hurt and still, be in the playoff conversation in a really tough Western Conference? So if he's healthy, I'd 100% say yes, because that's the point guard. That's the guy that makes you better defensively. But yeah, that Achilles injury would scare me a little bit. And he was not good in New Orleans after they traded him. His shooting numbers were terrible. So if he was healthy, I'd say yes, but it would have to be a really, really cheap discount for the Kings to trade for him, given that injury right now.
Greg Swartz, be sure to follow him on social media and check out all of his work on Bleacher Report. Greg, thank you so much. We got to do this again. Might be a long summer out here in Sacramento and in Cleveland as well. So definitely got to do this again, Greg. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
That was Greg Swartz of Bleacher Report. Outstanding stuff there. When we return, breaking down what we heard from Greg. Do we think the Kings have what it takes to get in the conversation with some of these big names? Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports.
Hey, it's Mike Rohn. If I have a choice, I like to do business with companies that actually stand for something.